The laughter started before she even finished speaking. It echoed across the dimly lit operations room like a careless storm. Maps covered the walls. Screens flickered with satellite feeds. The air smelled faintly of coffee and metal. A group of hardened soldiers stood around the table, studying the mission briefing, until one line in the file made someone snort. Combat Master? One of them muttered under his breath. The word spread through the room like a joke nobody could resist repeating. Across the table stood Captain Elena Voss. She didn't react. She simply folded her arms. She watched the room carefully, as if measuring every person in it. They saw a woman barely in her 30s, calm eyes, no dramatic stories attached to her name, no famous battles people talked about over drinks, just a quiet title, Combat Master. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing who's listening. Most of the men in that room had spent years chasing recognition, medals, missions, numbers, proof of their experience. So when the operations officer continued reading the briefing and casually mentioned Elena's rank qualification, skepticism filled the room like smoke. Sergeant Cole leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. Combat Master certification isn't something you just get handed, he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. You need a serious record for that. A few others nodded. Elena felt the familiar weight pressing against her chest. Not anger, not embarrassment, something older. She had seen this reaction before, many times. People looked at her and saw someone who didn't match their idea of a warrior. She understood why. Her record had never been public. Most of the missions she had been sent on were quiet operations, buried deep in classified archives, missions where success meant nobody outside the room ever knew what happened. But inside her mind, those memories still lived: cold mountains, endless nights, the sound of wind across abandoned villages, faces she tried not to remember. The operations officer cleared his throat. Well, actually, he said slowly, tapping the digital file projected on the wall, her combat evaluation was approved by special command. Cole raised an eyebrow. Approved based on what? The officer hesitated. For a moment the room felt unusually still. Then he opened another file, a longer one. Lines of classified operations appeared on the screen. Most were marked with restricted access codes, but a few summary numbers remained visible. At first nobody spoke. Then someone leaned forward. Wait, are those confirmed counts? The officer nodded once. Silence followed. The laughter vanished so quickly it almost felt unreal, because the number wasn't small, it wasn't even close. Elena had spent years operating in places where the line between survival and failure was razor thin, missions where hesitation meant entire teams wouldn't make it home. But the number wasn't what defined those moments. What stayed with her were the choices, the nights she had waited, hidden in silence, wondering whether pulling the trigger would save lives or haunt her forever. Cole stared at the screen, his earlier confidence dissolving. No way, he murmured. Someone else spoke quietly. That's more than half the unit's combined records. Elena finally broke her silence. You're all focused on numbers, she said calmly. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't proud either. It was tired. Every one of those missions came with a cost. The room shifted uncomfortably because suddenly the story wasn't about competition anymore. It was about responsibility. She stepped closer to the table, resting her hands on the edge. You think being a combat master means winning fights? She continued softly. Her eyes moved across the room. It means carrying the weight of every decision you make when other people's lives depend on you. No one laughed now. Outside the base, the wind pushed against the building walls. Somewhere down the hall, boots echoed faintly. Inside the room, something had changed. Respect had replaced doubt. Cole slowly stood from his chair. For a moment it looked like he might argue again. Instead, he nodded once, not as a challenge, as acknowledgement. And for Elena, that quiet moment meant more than any record ever could, because deep down she had never wanted people to fear her skills. She only wanted them to understand the burden behind them. The mission briefing continued soon after, but the tone had shifted completely. The same soldiers who had laughed minutes earlier now listened closely whenever Elena spoke, not because of her record, but because they finally understood what it meant. True strength is never loud, it is built quietly, decision by decision, in moments nobody else sees, and sometimes the strongest warriors are the ones who carry their stories in silence, because real power doesn't come from proving people wrong, it comes from knowing exactly who you are when the world doubts you. In the quiet spaces between doubt and truth, character reveals itself like the first light before dawn. If this story made you think, tell me in the comments what you would have done in that room. And don't forget to subscribe to Cinematic Whispers for more powerful stories that stay with you long after the screen fades to black.